Hello again, and I'm delighted to be chairing this session, Restoring Our Digital Freedom, joined by a stellar cast of characters for this discussion. And we've got Audrey Tang, Digital Minister Taiwan, joining us from Taiwan. And beside me, Leopoldo Lopez, Venezuelan activist and co-founder of the World Liberty Congress. Obviously, we were saying earlier, a lot of our focus today on the second day of the Copenhagen Democracy Summit is on this whole nexus between technology, democracy and freedom. Audrey Tang, I'm going to start with you to give us that perspective from Taiwan. This is something, the whole issue of disinformation, of electoral interference is something that's quite familiar to Taiwan. It's regularly cited as the place in the world that is most exposed to outside interference. Tell us more about that, and maybe something about, you just had elections this year, how that played out.
Well, this has been happening for quite a while, for a decade. According to VDEM, Taiwan is the top place in the world on the receiving end of information manipulation. I'm really happy to report that our January election is remarkably free of polarization. In fact, the effective polarization, how people hate each other across party lines, went to a historic low after the election. And the reason why, I think, is because the playbook, the pre-bunking, anticipatory debunking, and co-facts, collaborative fact-checking, these two pillars really worked.
Tell us about this pre-bunking. So pre-bunking has become the new debunking, it seems. Maybe explain to us, how do you pre-bunk? Well, give us some examples maybe of how Taiwan is trying to get ahead of this problem.
Yeah, what's crucial is preempting the information manipulation before it reaches people. And to do that, you need to suss out the grand narratives the manipulators use. For example, they always say that democracy never delivers. It only leads to chaos. The democratic process are corrupt. And then if you can pre-bunk these information manipulation, then you say not just to people that it's coming, but also show people how exactly, for example, there's going to be information manipulation about the election process being rigged, that the counts are doctored or whatever. So please take your recorder, take your phone and to the counting station, because we're a paper-only country when it comes to presidential and legislative ballots. So anyone can film each count from 3 different directions and keep a complete record. And interestingly, that actually puts the conspiracy theories right after the election to its ending very quickly, because all 3 major parties have people in the counting station and they can attest that there's no election rigging going on. I've also shared a couple of years ago a deepfake movie of myself, a short film of an actor playing me and showing people generative AI is coming. People can actually deepfake any celebrity or public figure very easily. So don't trust anything just because it sounds like me or look like me.
Okay, so that's one way of trying to highlight to people what the issues are before they happen, in a sense, so people are aware. This idea then of collective fact-checking, I mean, is there anything that you guys are particularly focusing on there to get people engaged in that, or how does that work?
Yeah, Taiwan has a vibrant cybersecurity, antivirus, and also trusted technology industry. So people usually install antivirus like from Trend Micro or blocking unsolicited calls from Who's Call and so on. And these companies do have solutions that you can invite a chatbot to your group chat, and you would just look at the fraudulent addresses, this one-click phish emails or whatever, and tell you that these are highly dubious. You should think twice before clicking it. But interestingly, all these also connects to the co-facts database, which is done by the G0V or Gov0 civil society organization as a movement, so that people can contribute, each and every one of us, new debunking materials, new clarification materials, and so on, to anything that is trending, that is viral. So in a sense, it's like Wikipedia, but in real time. And people do participate in what we call media competence, not just literacy, in their high school classes, because literacy is when you consume and competence is when you co-create. And we found that it is the process going through this fact-checking process that inoculates a young mind. It is not the facts-checked, those small nuggets of check facts that inoculates people. It's thinking like a journalist and going through the process that inoculates the people.
That's interesting. So when people are told this is not true, this is the reality, that might not have as much of an effect as if they are to go through the process of finding out the facts themselves and fact-checking themselves.
Exactly. It has to be transparent. It has to be participatory.
Interesting that intervention at a younger age. Just to encourage people as well to use the app. We will have time for questions at the end, so any questions you want to put to either of our panellists. Turning to you, Leopoldo Lopez, Venezuela, we heard from you yesterday as well. So much to say about your own biography, your time in prison, your efforts to stand up politically in your country, and now what you're doing here in exile, effectively. But can we just focus, what's fascinating, we've heard a lot about this being the year of elections. Venezuelans are going to the polls this summer. First of all, what's your feeling about that election? Do you think change could come? And secondly, what kind of role do you think technology may play in that?
Well, first, thank you again to the Copenhagen Summit, Audrey. It's a great honor to be sharing this panel with you. My main message today about Venezuela is that we need to be very optimistic. The Venezuelan people want change, and the Venezuelan people are mobilized. More than 80% of the people are clear that they want to vote against Nicolás Maduro. And we are going to an electoral process that is not fair. It's, of course, with all of the obstacles, but we have been able to go through all of those obstacles. And although we had a candidate that won the primaries, Maria Corina Machado, that was not allowed to register, we were able to register Edmundo González, who was completely unknown only 3 weeks ago. And today, he's polling over 60% of the support. So as of today, there will be a transition in Venezuela starting on August. A lot of scenarios could happen, yes. Maduro can call a war with Guyana. Maduro can postpone the election. But as of today, we will start a transition to democracy in August with all of the obstacles. And my main message to the people here listening is to take a look at Venezuela with great levels of attention, because the Venezuelan people want change. And if there is change in Venezuela, there will be change in Nicaragua, there will be change in Cuba, there will be change in Bolivia.
Yeah, it's fascinating, this idea that the original candidate was banned from running, and now you have this relatively unknown who's entered the race with Maria Mercado, appearing alongside him a lot of these rallies. But despite this optimism, I mean, how confident are people that this can be a fair election? And what role would technology, misinformation, do you expect that to play a big role in this?
Well, the regime has been very active in using all of the tools of technology, censorship, in order to try to get their message across. But there is something that is heavier than all of the manipulation, which is reality. They can tell you all of the lies through social media, through TV, but if you try to get running water in your house and you don't have running water, if you switch the lights and there's no electricity, if you go to the shop and try to buy food and you don't have enough money to buy food for your kids, or the reality is heavier, and that is why people want change. However, technology still plays an important role, and access to internet, the very basic issue of technology, which is access to internet, is crucial for this election, to let people know how to vote, to let people know where to vote, to let people know what is happening before, during, and after the election will be critical. So we are figuring out ways in which to overcome all of the censorship that the regime has imposed historically, and that they're preparing to impose for this election as well.
Because that's an interesting point, because Audrey Tang, you were making the point there that Taiwan is extremely advanced when it comes to technology. You were talking there about the citizens of Taiwan. I mean, we all know that the companies that emerged from Taiwan, but the citizens themselves being so aware of antiviral products for a long time. Do you think that kind of media literacy and access that Leopoldo is talking about here is important in terms of trying to tackle disinformation and giving people that power?
Yeah, definitely. I think not only internet is a human right in Taiwan, broadband is considered a human right. So for just around 16 euros a month, you get unlimited data connections, no matter if you're in the most remote island or whether you're on the top mountain, almost 4,000-meter highs in Yushan. And that's our commitment to broadband as a human right. I would also add to that the democracy is in Taiwan, not just voting, but also deliberation. Is a continuous democracy that people can go online and initiate a petition with 5,000 signatures, and the minister have to consider that, or the minister can also send, as we just did, 200,000 SMS to our people, and then select a microcosm, a representative mini public of 450 people to ask the people to deliberate online and to tell us what they want us to do about misinformation. And by and large, when it comes to generative AI, people want us to instill some way of digital signature so that people can know a faked celebrity versus a signed celebrity video in advertisement, but they do not want to compromise privacy, do not want to compromise the freedom to whistleblow online and so on. So we need to invent and deploy technologies that can provide a sense of trust and uniqueness without compromising privacy. And we've included all these suggestions into the new Anti-Fraud Act just sent to the Parliament last week. So I think this continuous democracy is also another step toward getting people more transparent and accountable governance, because they can participate in the here and now, not just every 4 years.
And actually, I'm going to bring in one of the questions here from the audience. Narayan Liu from Fight for Freedom, Stand with Hong Kong, has got a relevant question here, which is pointing out that Taiwan has a big elderly population. And how do you recommend that governments aid that older, elderly community about this rapid development of AI and, emerging potential threats?
Yeah, indeed. I think we go where the people are, and our elderly people are actually very active online. In a sense, this online deliberation facilitated by AI is more inclusive to many elderly people, because if we ask them all come to Tainan or Taipei or some other place for physical deliberation, there's a certain cost in mobility and for their time and so on. But if it's online, then they are as happy to share their wisdom as any young people. So in a sense, providing broadband as a human right and also helping the helpers, making sure that the people who support the elderly people can get sufficient amount of, for example, literature about the really assistive way of getting real-time interpretation, real-time captions, or even sign language interpretations and so on, so that they can help the elderly, the senior people, to connect in a way that they're most comfortable with. This idea of appropriate technology, bringing technology to where people are instead of asking them to adopt a one-size-fits-all way of interacting with each other. I think that is also very important when it comes to digital democracy.
Leopoldo Lopez, how important, we're talking about the negatives here in a way with technology, but how important has been social media for you and for opposition voices? I'm thinking of someone like Alexei Navalny. Look at what social media did for him. It put him on the global map. It allowed him to speak out against President Putin when traditional medias were effectively silent in Russia. Have you had a similar experience with social media? See your Twitter following, etc. Was that a help to you during captivity, for example, and in your work since?
Well, it's changed. So 10 years ago, in 2014, when we called for protest, I was completely censored from TV, radio, regular media. All we had was social media. And we brought hundreds of thousands of people to the streets for weeks, for months. But the regime caught up with social media. And today, social media is a very contested space. So if you go in X in Venezuela and you look for trending topics, you will find topics like Russia, or Putin, or Taiwan even. And then when you look at the conversation under those topics, is the narrative of Russia, of China, even of Iran. Sometimes you even find in trending topics in Persian. Of course, there is not a Persian population in Venezuela that would be supporting organically that conversation. What is happening is that there is also a global confrontation. We have in that space the interests of Russia, China, Iran, that are linked with the dictatorship. However, that is the one window of opportunity that we have, because TV and radio and regular press is completely censored to the democratic voices. So it's a contested space, but still is the only space that we have.
And that idea about the government catching up, do you think that they have now a more sophisticated understanding of social media and they will deploy this in certain ways in the election?
No, of course, and not just the use of trolls and bots. And they have, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in this, and it's a multinational organization, because you see these trolls and bots being moved from one issue to another, and they're not national issues. They moved from an issue in Venezuela to support an issue somewhere in Europe, to support an issue in another country in Venezuela, in Latin America. And you also see the way they have evolved in trying to humanize the dictatorship. They're using their TikTok accounts, so they present Maduro as a funny guy, as the good husband, as a good citizen, and the humble person. And of course, all of that is a manipulation that is being promoted with a lot of support, with a lot of consultants, and a lot of money behind that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important as well to say in the whole context of this two-day summit that a lot of established democracies also use this. It's not just dictators I'm thinking of Modi in India, who's probably going to get re-elected, the world's biggest democracy in India. His government has used, sometimes in nefarious ways, the power of social media in an unbelievable way, and it's happening right now. We have in the United States, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, using social media to disseminate fake news and false information, and everyone looked on and wasn't able to cope with that. So, even in democracies and democratic, very long established democracies, social media is being used by those in power. Audrey Tang, coming back to you, on the specifics of the election in Taiwan, that was very, people were extremely interested in that. Earlier in the year, did this issue of electoral interference, or even, you mentioned at the beginning, which was quite interesting, that you were quite positive that the polarization isn't really there. Did people accept the results of the election? I mean, as we saw, I just mentioned Trump, but, in America, in the United States of America, we still have a huge number of people who don't accept the results of the 2020 election, and that's in one of the world's biggest democracies. So, in Taiwan, maybe explain about how this all played out in your own elections there in January.
Well, the end result is that all three major parties, none of which got a majority, absolute majority in the parliament, feel they have won a little bit. But also, I think it is how we responded to the polarization attacks, which is different. We also, like many democratic governments, strive to respond very quickly with clarifications, usually around 60 minutes after a viral disinformation campaign. But I think we strive to respond in a way that is pro-social. That is to say, not to fight fire with more toxic fire, but rather to respond with messages, with affinity, with compassion, curiosity, even a little bit of humor, certainly nuance, personal story, reasoning, and respect. And these are the pro-democracy attributes that can catch on social media. In fact, there are people researching this kind of pro-social social media, and they found there's recent papers that shows embedding those democratic values into social media, like the community notes in X.com. Through those societal objective functions, they do not decrease engagement. It's as many people who want to engage with each other, but people feel less polarized and less lonely and so on. So I think one way that we as democratic countries can show the platforms is that actually we should encourage and nudge them towards such pro-democracy algorithms so that the bridging message flow to the top, not the one that are toxic or hateful or polarizing.
That's interesting. The language used to bring these people along and refute arguments, is as important as trying to refute them. You seem to be saying, yeah, interesting point. Leopoldo, just on you're living effectively in exile now. Do you feel that the expat community, the Venezuelan community abroad, has much of a role here in the conversation about the election? We've seen a huge emigration, particularly to the United States, from Venezuela. I mean, you touched on some of the social deprivations facing people in the country, the reality of living in Venezuela at the moment. How do you assess the power of this kind of exodus and these Venezuelans in exile as you approach this huge election?
Well, let me just give a bit of context. Venezuela used to be one of the most prosperous countries in Latin America only 25 years ago, and democracy was dismantled. As a consequence, the economic went to a spiral. As a consequence, we had a humanitarian crisis. And as a consequence, as you said, we have today the largest migration crisis in the world. And many people are not aware of this. 1 out of every 4 Venezuelans have left our country. That's 8 million people living in other Latin American countries, the US, Europe, and it's massive. And of course, this it's part of the force for change towards Venezuelan people. We won't be able to vote. Of the 8 million Venezuelans who are in exile, only 67,000 will be able to vote. So they close the opportunity to Venezuelans living outside to vote. But we all have ways to communicate, to mobilize the Venezuelan people internally. So I think that there is a very important role in technology there, not just to communicate, but also to provide support and resources. And that's one of the uses of technology that I believe has a negative side, but it has a positive side, which is the use of cryptocurrency, that we have seen how this has become a tool to provide resources, remittances to the Venezuelan people without the interference of the state. I think that there is a critical concept here in terms of communications, access to internet, and access to resources through cryptocurrency, which is to provide independence to individuals. Independence in terms of their financial reality, independence in terms of the way they communicate, they consume information. And I think that this is something that should be promoted in terms of the democracy confrontation that we have with the autocratic model, because the autocratic model is about completely the contrary. It's about the dependence of individuals to the state. So I think that technology is set to provide a lot of independence in different areas of individuals, even living under autocratic regimes.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, it reminds, listening to what's happening in Venezuela and that sense of hope, people will all remember like the Arab Spring, where that was fueled by social media. And then in a lot of cases, ultimately the outcome, it didn't follow through. So, but that was a different time. And, there's a very specific situation in Venezuela now. And the very fact that this opposition candidate is being permitted to run and is so ahead in terms of the polling is showing a real possibility of change in July. Audrey Tang, coming back to you, there's a couple of questions that are coming in, and maybe as well, Leopoldo, you'd have views on this. What additional requirements should we create for social media platforms to have them further support democracy? Audrey Tang, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I co-wrote a whole book about this. It's going to be published next week, but you can already read it online. Great. It's at plurality.net. But the idea of plurality or collaborative diversity requires social media to not only accurately portray the diversity, but also, as I mentioned, build bridges across those very diverse points and see the conflict that's inevitable as a fuel for co-creation. And in the flip side, if a social media permits, hateful messages, fraudulent messages, and so on, the consensus of the Taiwanese mini public throughout alignment assembly deliberation is that, for example, if somebody gets conned for $1 million because of a deepfake of a celebrity offering investment advice, then that platform should be liable for the full $1 million that's lost by the victim. It's as simple as that. So it's two things, right? One is this pro-social bridging algorithmic improvement. And then if the platform doesn't do that, or it doesn't even do basic KYC and allow the freedom of speech to be abused by deepfake AI and so on, then we need them to assume full liability.
Interesting. Leopoldo, any thoughts on the role of the social media giants? Do you see that they should be doing more if there's, for example, misinformation in the Venezuelan elections? Or
just a very concrete example. I see that social media has become a huge platform for autocrats. And I have seen how activists, pro-democracy leaders, have been banned from their social media, while the autocrats, the dictators, the violators of human rights have full access and full deployment of their social media channels. We heard Masih Alinejad, I remember her telling me last year that her Instagram account was shut down because of pressure of the mullahs from Iran and the Islamic Republic from Iran. And I know that this is happening to different activists worldwide. We have Maduro, we have all of his regime with full access and full deployment of their manipulation in social media. And this is the same in all of autocracies. So I think this should be an issue. And also, I believe that a lot of the conversation about technology and freedom, it's about playing defense. How do you protect yourself from deep fakes, from manipulation? But I think more thought should be put into how to play offense. Because it is a conflict, at least from where we stand in living in autocratic countries, that we want democracy. It's not just playing defense, because defense will let us only where we are standing. We need to go forward. We need to play offense. What do we do? What can we do in order to move forward? I don't have the answers to that, but all of the answers. But what I do believe is that the attitude should not only be about shielding, about defending, about putting, some blocks to what autocrats could do, but how to move forward as well.
Interesting. That's a good final thought, because I'm just, as a final point, I was just going to come to you, Audrey Tang, and just picking up on that idea about going on the offence. What can people do? How can we engage positively? What are the positive possibilities that technology can open up when it comes to advancing or nurturing or protecting democracy? Any final thoughts on what you think is kind of doable and what works?
Yeah, I think Web3 or decentralized communication is certainly one of the very exciting frontiers. The Ministry of Digital Affairs in Taiwan invests in interplanetary file system, IPFS, as a way to keep our website afloat so people can pin our websites. But it also allows for censorship and tamper-proof way to have conversations online. And we can also think of the way of our automated facilitation technology that we just shared that facilitated like 450 people in 45 different rooms so that they can come to consensus instead of fighting each other. That actually can be turned into like a personal assistant, even running on personal computers or phones. And in autocratic regimes, that will be a very good like first coach in democracy that people can use on the ground. Or you can think of a addictive social media platform like TikTok or any other platform, and with this algorithm replaced by this kind of decentralized, open, collaborative governed algorithm to show people that it is actually possible to have a digital democracy without getting addicted on the more antisocial stuff. So I think there are a lot of experiments that can run and a lot of synergies between those experiments.
Okay, well, on that positive note, thank you very much, Minister Audrey Tang and Leopoldo Lopez, again for joining us. Thank you both for a fascinating discussion.